Hi guys, it's Joe from Finding Faith, and I wanted to do a video series where I talk about the Bible verses that I've memorized and why I've memorized those Bible verses. But first I want to point out that initially for a while actually, I wasn't very keen on memorizing Bible verses. I didn't really see the point. And it took me a little bit to figure out what the point of it really was. The point of memorizing Bible verses is so that you have verses that are on your heart, that you can turn to, that help you understand God, that ground you, that bring you to a good place, and just, keep your heart in the right area, basically. Just something that you can turn to on a moment's notice, especially when things are getting tough. So as of this video's recording, I have 100 Bible verses memorized. My original goal was 108 because I wanted to live to be 108 years old, with the idea that if I live to be 108, assuming we're all still around then, that I would see the 22nd century's beginning. I just thought that'd be kind of interesting. But I actually raised that number from 108 to 110 recently. The reason why I did this is because I found out that if you live to be 100, you're a centenarian. If you live to be 110 or more, you're called a super centenarian. And that just sounds cool. So, I was originally going with one verse per year of life, and now it's one verse per year of life, except I want to live to be an extra 2 years. But of course, that's all very idealistic. I don't have full control over that for a number of reasons. So I want to just talk about the first 5 Bible verses that I memorized, why I memorized each of these verses, and just kind of where I am. All of these Bible verses I memorized them in the ESV, just because when I started attending the main church that I've been going to for years, they read out of the ESV, and the ESV is just the one that I'm most familiar with. The exception is the Exodus verse that I have, but that's far future video. I also set out to memorize at least one verse from every single book of the Bible. There are 66 books of the Bible, and there's a few that, I've memorized a couple verses from, a few of 3, and 2 that I've memorized 4 from, or will have memorized 4 from. So the very first Bible verse I memorized is from one of my favorite books of the Bible. It's from my favorite book of the New Testament. It's from Hebrews, specifically Hebrews 12:11. Hebrews 12:11 goes, "For the moment all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it." So with this particular verse from Hebrews has a lot of gems in it, first of all. So sometimes it can be really hard to select, just a few verses from a certain book and everything. But with Hebrews, this particular verse is just so strong because we suffer, we hate discipline, but it makes us stronger. And the Bible doesn't shy away from this at all. This is one of a couple of verses that are like this that I've memorized. This is just, this verse when just things are really hard, it's a great verse to turn to, at least for me. The second Bible verse that I memorized is Romans 5:20. Romans 5:20 says, "Now the law came in to increase the trespass, but where sin increased, grace abounded all the more." I think it's really important for us to remember that, God gives us something to expose sin. We can respond to it with sin as much as we want to, but, if we really do turn to God, if God really is in our midst, and to a certain extent we have to let him be in our midst, I've learned. If we really do that, then we will just get so much grace in spite of our sin. Now there's another verse, I think it's also in Romans, that says, shall we keep on sinning that grace may increase? Obviously there's a difference between, willful sin and accidental sin just because of our nature. It's kind of hard to know the difference between the two of those sometimes, but that's where repeated practice and everything comes into play. And just as your relationship with God deepens, as my relationship with God continues to deepen, it just becomes so much easier to recognize the difference between, when you're willfully sinning and when you sin by accident and just, find yourself slipping into your old ways. The third Bible verse I memorized is 1 Corinthians 10:13. You may have noticed, if you are a bit of a Bible verse savant, that these first 3 verses are kind of cliche. Don't worry, they will get less cliche. I promise, they get less cliche over time, for the most part. So 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, "No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man." God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it. I get why a lot of people memorize this verse. It is so strong. There's so much meat in it. It talks about God being faithful, about how every temptation has been faced before, and some level, you may be facing it in a slightly unique way, but it's been faced before, and God, he's not the one tempting you, but he's letting you be tempted. And you can kind of couple this with Hebrews 12:11, because God wants to make you stronger. And I just think that that's really, that's cool. And it's very loving. It doesn't always feel that way, but that's more of our own problem. It's not God's problem. It's ours. Another cliche Bible verse, the fourth verse I memorized, Psalm 73:26. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. This is a verse that, sometimes when you pray, it's helpful to incorporate Bible verses into prayer. This is one that I wish I would incorporate more often. The book of Psalms is actually my favorite book of the Old Testament, so combine it with Hebrews, those are my two favorite books of the Bible. And the Psalms they're written in a poetic way, but there's so much truth in the Psalms. You can still read the poetry and understand, the truth, even with the poetic language. And the thing about this psalm is, you may fail in all kinds of ways. It's going to be hard, but God is always there for you. You may notice a bit of a theme with these first few verses, and I think maybe, that's just the point I was at when I selected these verses to memorize. I don't know. All right, and the fifth Bible verse that I memorized is another old favorite, 1 Samuel 16:7. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. And the thing is, we have this tendency to be extremely conceited and think we know someone or even ourselves just really well and know exactly what will happen if this happens or what have you. But we just don't know. We are constantly wrong. And this is a great verse to turn to remember that only God can really know what's in someone's heart, on any given subject. And there's just something that's so humbling about this. It's hard to admit, it's hard to practice, but this is a good verse to memorize to make that practice a little bit easier. And those are the first 5 Bible verses that I memorized. Stay tuned for more of these videos. Feel free to watch my other stuff. Don't forget to, like, comment, subscribe, spread the word. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a blessed day or night, and I look forward to, seeing where your journey goes. Thanks again.